Hey everybody, I got a new deck for you. This time, again, with monsters, but it's going to be with Gurnikora. A lot of the nerfs and changes to the meta might mean that this is the leader for you, because she bleeds, and we all ask that question every now and then.
Do you bleed?
Alright, so let's hop into the deck building aspect of the video, and I'll show you exactly what my Gurnikora list looks like and how to play it. Alrighty, so the version of this deck kind of goes on the whole thought process of that old adage of if it bleeds, you can kill it. So a lot of decks these days tend to favor long round threes to get their strategy set up to maximize their damage and their synergies and really get a point train going. Now this deck does the opposite of that. It really thrives, no pun intended, in longer rounds, in shorter rounds. It thrives in shorter rounds where you can really get a lot of work done with 3 or 4 card round threes, and really stack the damage. And I mean, your first order of business in this deck is to win round 1, bleed round 2, short round 3. That's usually how this goes. So we're going to go through the card list, and I'll tell you a little bit about the choices and how they're played. So right down the pipe over here, we're going to start with one-time Necker. Now the Necker in the deck is it's a 4-drop filler. The 4-drop filler is over here. I mean, the reason I took Necker is because it's 2 bodies that can thrive. So typically after you play 2 units in a row, you'll typically get plus value off of the Necker, so it's not so bad. 2 times Bruxa. Now Bruxa is a card that I've had some consideration with. I think that a 2.2 damage card, it seems a lot like the Wolf Pack, but it potentially gains Thrive. There are a lot of cards out there, be it Skirmishers or the Sentinels in Squayatel, that come out as 2-drop bodies. This can go ahead and get the kill on those and get the Thrive ability. It also fishes out sometimes a little bit of removal from your opponents as well. If it sticks, great. If not, well, it's just a throwaway bronze nonetheless. I've got 2 times Foglet for thinning. I have 2 times Wyvern. I really like Wyvern these days. It really gets the jam going from Necker to Bruxa to Wyvern. Get that train of Thrive going. Really get the value. The 2 damage can be paired up potentially with the Bruxa in order to get rid of a smaller unit. Then we have the Alpha Werewolf. Immunity is so big now because everyone's playing a lot of control and a lot of kill your stuff kind of jam there. So the Alpha Werewolf at 5 easily becomes a 5 provision, easily becomes a 5, 6, 7 strength, no problem. Down the road now, I got 2 times Wild Hunt Rider. Very easy to get these out. Usually you're playing a lot of big monsters in this deck, so getting dominance is easy to get the bad boys out. I have 2 Cyclops, no problem. Removal. They also are 5 strength is good to continue the triggers of the Thrive units. I have 2 Griffins, 8 strengths, 7 provision. Now, the trade-off here is obviously you got to destroy a unit on your own row, and that's not the worst case in the world. Now, you could do it easily just by producing a Gurnikora fruit and then trading in with it. That's usually my opening play. Otherwise, what you can do is you can go your opener could be Gurnikora fruit into a Foglet, get the Thrive ability there, and then you drop a Griffin onto the Foglet to thin the deck, get another proc off on the fruit, and you're all good. So those are great. Now, why do you play these? Well, they also come into play later. The Ghouls, because I got 2 Ghouls in here. These are 9-point cards late game, which are humongous. If you play it properly, you can even maybe get one off in round 1. But typically, the Ghoul is there for a round 2 push and bleed, or a round 3 finisher. And you have 2 of them. You also have 2 Griffins in the deck that they can eat, no problem. And finally, in the bronze category, I have Ice Giant, 8 provision, 7 strength. There's no special sauce over here. It's purely just point slam, 7 points, no big deal. The reason why it's a 7, why I picked this over something else in the 8, I wanted the high ceiling of point value, which could then, again, trigger Thrive. This 7 is easily 8, 9, 10, depending on how many Thrive you have on the board. All right, now let's go back to Gold's Werecat. I've got a Werecat in there easily. Just smoke a row for about 4 or 5 points, plus the 2, plus the Thrive. No big deal. It's also a good target for a a Cyclops. It's also a good target for Consume, and I'll show you what the Consume looks like because we have Brewis. We have the Monster Witchers. So Brewis is there to consume, no big deal. Same with Weavis and Wispus. These are all good. Typically, in this deck at least, the Brewis is there to consume a Death Rattle trigger or to potentially regain you dominance in a match. If your opponent is trying to get taller than you to prevent certain cards from going off because you don't have dominance, this is a good way to get it to happen. It's also good to trigger off on your other cards like your Werecat to get this to trigger again. It also can work out with your Catachan. We have Catachan in here. Eat the Catachan, spit out another vampire. All's good and gravy in the hood with this one. What else we got? Count Caldwell. 10 points for 8 is just way too easy. Now, I usually worry sometimes about this card being out because there are decks that go taller than you and can really, with all the damage that people are stacking these days, they can really shave down your tall units, giving you no longer the tallest unit on the board. So Count Caldwell will switch sides. Now, you can always get around this by either consuming it with the Brewis or tossing it with the Cyclops, but this is not a bad play. 10 tall will trigger a lot of your taller unit thrives, like when your werewolf or your Catachan get a little high. So I like this card in here as well. For 8 provisions, you're rarely going to get better than 10 points. Beyond that, I have the Protofletter. Now this is such a great card, and it's good beyond the fact that it's 10 for 10 with dominance. Now I like it because it's 10 for 10, so the conversion of provision to power is really good. But at the same time, it's not just that. It's the fact that it does 3 damage, so you can potentially get rid of a smaller engine piece. But it also keeps, when you drain for that 3, it keeps it under 8, which is really, really key for dodging Geralt or dodging Leo. So in short rounds, it's a really safe bet. I really think that this card is probably one of the better cards that have come out of the set. I really, really dig this this card. And finally, Old Spear Tip Asleep. Again, vanilla 9 for 10. There's nothing really special about this deck in terms of building. Synergy in this deck is very minimal. This deck really relies on just chaining a lot of points together over and over and over and really bleeding out your opponent's win conditions in round 2. This deck can go really, really deep in round 1. There's not many cards that you're not willing to give up. Obviously, you might get some bricks because, let's see, I mean, if you get bricked with a ghoul early and you have no way to really eat anything, that's really going to be one of your early game problems. But if you look at the actual deck and you mulligan fairly decently, you don't have any cards that you are absolutely not willing to play and not willing to commit early. So you can really go all in round 1 and get yourself those victories. Now, the big question about this, and the reason why I named this deck If It Bleeds, is because if it bleeds, it can die. And that's usually how you're going to beat a lot of opponents with this deck. So your strategy with this is don't be afraid of round 2. Round 2, we got to make round 2 significant again because it doesn't necessarily factor into many win rates. Usually people play down to 5 cards. They'll draw up, they'll play enough to just drop a card and pass or dry pass, etc. That's not what this is about. This deck wants to go and push the envelope in round 2 because everything that you're going to draw, hopefully down the line, is going to be worth a ton of points. If you do this correctly, whether you draw a Griffin, whether you draw your Spear Tip, a Cyclops, an Ice Giant, one of your Crones, Catachan, Protofletter, Count Caldwell, there's so much in this deck that will give you a lot of point reach in a small space. So your opponent who needs 2-3 turns to really set up their mojo and get things going and to chain off a few things, you want to make sure that you're really squeezing them out. And I have played this deck to go down a card into round 3 just to make sure that my opponent is playing with as small a hand at the end as possible, because they might draw into complete trash, or they're going to be using all their win conditions that they have been amassing in round 2 or held on to in round 2 and mulliganing for in order to make sure that that happens. This deck beats Skellige, it beats Scoia'tael. I haven't had a Gurnikora mirror with this yet, but I've beaten Arrakis Queen with this deck. I mean, if you have any questions about it, you can always reach out. But here it is. We'll go down the list one more time. 1-time Necker, I have 2 times Bruxa. I have 2 times the Foglet, 2 times Wyvern, 1 time Alpha Werewolf. I have 2 Ghouls. I have both Wild Hunt Riders, both Cyclopses, 2 Griffins, the Werecat. I've got 1 Ice Giant, big, bad, and ugly. I've got the Witcher trio of the monster universe, Brewis, Wispus, Weavis. I've got Count Caldwell, and I've got Catacan, as well as Proto Fleder, and at the top we got Old Speartip Asleep. Now again, 11 provisions, not much room to really breathe, but this deck has a lot of reach and has a lot of flexibility with it as well. All right, so there it is. If it bleeds, you can kill it. That's pretty much your mantra moving forward with this Gurna list. Like I said, 11 provisions is not a lot for a leader, so you don't have much room to breathe, but there is a lot of flexibility in terms of plugging and playing cards to match the current meta. So I hope you enjoy it. If you do, go ahead, leave a comment here, hit the subscribe button on YouTube. You can also catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/WatchFlake, on Twitter as well at WatchFlake. You be kind to one another. I will see you very soon, and adios.